Part 1. The Will. The countryside had never felt so quiet. Emma Reed stepped out of the car, her boots crunching against the gravel driveway of the old manor. The wind was sharp, slicing through her coat, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. It was the house, her grandmother's house. It stood like a forgotten monument, 3 stories tall, windows like empty eyes, and the same ivy crawling up its walls that Emma remembered from her childhood. The place hadn't changed. Not on the outside, but inside. Inside, everything was about to unravel. She hadn't been back in nearly 12 years. After her mother's death, Emma left and never looked back. Not even when her father called. Not when her brother pleaded. Not when her grandmother grew ill. And yet, here she was, because of the will. Still as grim as ever. A voice muttered behind her. Emma turned to see her younger brother, Noah, standing with his arms crossed, his dark hair tousled by the wind. His eyes held that same bitter sharpness she remembered, a mixture of guilt and anger that had never really faded. "I didn't think you'd come," he added. "I didn't think she'd die," Emma replied coldly. The front door creaked open. A tall man in a black coat stepped out, Mr. Graves, the family lawyer, looking appropriately funereal. "Come in," he said. "We're ready to begin." The parlor smelled like dust and forgotten memories. Emma sat across from her father, Richard, whose face had aged into stone. He hadn't even glanced her way. Next to him sat Noah, fidgeting with his wedding ring even though he'd divorced years ago. Only the lawyer seemed calm, setting the envelope on the table like it contained a nuclear code. "This is the last will and testament of Edith Eleanor Reed," Mr. Graves began. "Signed 2 months before her death." Emma blinked. 2 months? That meant she knew she was dying. She could have called. She could have. "She left specific conditions for the inheritance," Graves continued. "The financial assets are divided equally between her son Richard and grandson Noah." Noah's eyebrows lifted slightly. Richard remained expressionless. "But the property, the Reed estate, is to go to Emma." The room fell silent. Emma stared at him, stunned. "To me?" Graves nodded. "With a condition. You must stay in the house for 7 consecutive nights. Alone. No visitors. No leaving overnight." Richard scoffed. "She's playing games even from the grave." "She was lucid when she signed," the lawyer said. "If Emma does not fulfill the condition, the estate goes to Mr. Reed." Emma looked between them. Her father's jaw was tight, his fists clenched. She could almost feel the rage boiling beneath the surface. Noah gave her a look. It wasn't anger. It was fear. That night, Emma sat in her grandmother's bedroom, the only room in the house that didn't feel like a tomb. The old wallpaper peeled slightly at the edges, and a faded portrait of a young Edith hung above the fireplace. She had the same stern mouth, the same distant eyes. The floor creaked beneath her feet as she moved toward the window. Outside, the trees swayed violently. She could have sworn she saw a figure standing near the garden, but when she looked again, nothing. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Emma lit the fireplace, trying to warm the room, and opened her suitcase. As she unpacked, something slipped out from between her clothes. An old photograph. She froze. It was a picture of her mother, her father, and someone else, a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, standing beside Richard. But Emma had never seen this child before. On the back of the photo, in her grandmother's handwriting, were 4 words: "Do not trust him." Downstairs, the hallway lights flickered. Emma walked through the corridor, feeling the cold settle into her skin. The house was groaning, wood pipes, old bones. As she passed the study, she noticed the door was ajar. Something compelled her to go inside. The room was untouched. The same massive desk. The same bookshelves filled with medical texts and dusty Bibles. On the table lay an old leather-bound journal. Emma picked it up, opened the first page, and read, "He is back. I hear him breathing through the walls. I locked the door, but it won't keep him out forever." The ink was shaky, the handwriting familiar. It was her grandmother's. Emma didn't sleep that night, Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the child's face from the photo. Pale, smiling, unnatural. At 3:14 a.m., the hallway outside her door creaked. She sat up in bed, heart racing. The doorknob moved just slightly. She stared, but it stopped. Silence returned. Emma lay back, gripping the old photo in her hand. The first night had begun, and she had 6 more to go. Part 2. The cracks in the walls. The second morning greeted Emma with frost on the inside of the window. The heater had rattled through the night but offered little warmth. Still, it wasn't the cold that kept her awake. It was the sound, the creaking, the breathing. She wasn't even sure it had been real. Just nerves, maybe. Isolation. The house was old, and she was sleep-deprived. But the memory of the doorknob turning, slow, deliberate, refused to let go. Downstairs, the kitchen was eerily silent. The pipes groaned when she ran the tap, spitting out rust-colored water. She dumped it and tried again. It ran clear, sort of. On the kitchen table lay the photograph again. Emma stared at it. She hadn't left it there. She had tucked it back into her suitcase. The child's face, still unknown, still smiling. Do not trust him. Her grandmother's warning echoed in her mind. By noon, Emma was exploring the house. She needed to keep moving, needed something to distract her from the gnawing feeling in her chest. The attic was next. It had been locked when she was a child. Her grandmother always said it was unsafe. Now the door creaked open with a hard pull. Dust exploded into the air. Inside, trunks, cobwebs, and the smell of old cedar. Faint light trickled in through a circular window. Emma found a box marked Edith 1965. Inside were journals, sketches, and dried flowers. She flipped through one of the notebooks. The handwriting was delicate, youthful. The boy cries all night. Richard says he's just sensitive. But I think something is wrong with him. The way he watches me. It's not like a child. Emma blinked. The boy? He showed up again last night. I told Richard to lock the door. I don't want him coming into my room again. He won't speak. Just watches. The pages after that were torn out. Emma closed the journal with shaking hands. Was she reading about her father or someone else? That evening, Emma sat in the study again, scanning the bookshelves. Most were Bibles, encyclopedias, or outdated medical texts. But one stood out, The Sound and the Fury. Her grandmother had hated fiction. She pulled it from the shelf. It was heavier than it should have been. Inside the hollowed-out book was a rusted key and a folded map of the house, hand-drawn, annotated. There was a room behind the library wall, a hidden room. Emma returned to the library just as the sun dipped beneath the horizon. The temperature dropped with it. Her breath fogged as she traced her fingers along the wooden shelves. She found it. A panel behind the third bookshelf slid slightly when she pressed it. With effort, she shoved the case aside, revealing a narrow passage. Cobwebs, dust, silence. She stepped inside. The room was small, barely big enough to stand in. On the floor lay a child's toy, an old wooden top, cracked and faded. The wallpaper inside had childlike drawings scratched into it. Stick figures, a sun, what looked like a dog. But there was also something else. A sentence, etched into the plaster in jagged letters. I am still here. Emma stepped back. A gust of wind or something slammed the library door shut behind her. She slept on the couch that night with the fire burning. Her grandmother's journal, the photo, the map. They all sat on the coffee table before her like puzzle pieces she couldn't fit together. Who was the boy? Why was her grandmother so afraid? And what did Richard, her father, know? At 2:51 a.m., she woke to the sound of footsteps upstairs. Measured. Heavy. Not the house creaking. Not her imagination. Real. She rose slowly, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at her to run. But she didn't. She climbed the stairs. At the end of the hall, the door to the attic was open. She hadn't left it that way. Inside, the small window glowed faintly with moonlight. And on the floor, scratched deep into the wood, was a new message. Who are you? The next morning, Emma called Noah. I need to know the truth, she said. About Dad. About the house. About the boy. Noah was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, I've been looking into her medical records. Grandmother's. And there's something strange. What kind of strange? There was another child, he whispered. Born in 1961. A boy. He was never mentioned in the family files. No birth certificate. No death record either. Emma's hands trembled. What happened to him? She asked. Noah hesitated. I don't know, but there's one note, scribbled in a hospital log. Just a sentence. He paused. Emma waited. It says, child removed from premises. Patient claimed the boy belonged to the Walls. Part 3, Bloodlines. Emma couldn't breathe. She stared at the phone in her hand, Noah's voice still echoing in her ears. The boy belonged to the Walls. What the hell did that mean? She looked around the living room, suddenly aware of how quiet the house had become. Not peaceful quiet, suffocating, like it was listening. The Walls felt closer than before. That afternoon, Noah arrived. He wasn't supposed to. The will clearly stated Emma had to stay alone. But he showed up anyway, claiming he forgot something in the basement years ago. She let him in, secretly grateful, though she'd never admit it. Nice place, he said, glancing at the shadows. Feels like something out of The Shining. Emma forced a laugh. You always did love horror. Ironic, considering we grew up inside one. He pulled a folder from his backpack. Medical records, photos, scans of Edith's handwriting. She was admitted 3 times between 1963 and 1970, he explained. Diagnosed with paranoid delusions, auditory hallucinations. But here's the thing. Each time, she said she was hiding from someone in the house. Who? Emma asked. Noah tapped the edge of a document. She called him the boy without a name. Emma stiffened. Noah flipped to the next page. A grainy black and white photo of a crib inside a basement room. She said the boy didn't belong to God or man, that he came from the silence between breaths. And she kept him locked away. Emma felt her skin crawl. This is insane. I know, Noah said quietly. But then there's this. He handed her a hospital receipt. At the top, Richard Reed. Emma blinked. Dad. He signed her out. Each time. That evening, Noah explored the basement while Emma stood in the kitchen, staring at the fireplace. She remembered sitting there as a child, her mother reading stories, her grandmother silently knitting beside her. That life felt like a movie now. Staged. Fabricated. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had always been off. Noah returned an hour later, his face pale. I found a door, he said, behind the old oil tank. It was boarded up. Emma followed him down into the cold, damp basement. Mold clung to the walls. Pipes dripped like slow heartbeats. Behind the tank, just as he said, was a sealed door. Together, they pried off the boards. The door creaked open. Inside was a small room with no windows. The walls were covered in crayon drawings. Faces, dozens of them. All the same. Round eyes. Open mouths. Screaming. In the corner sat a crib, rusted and broken. Inside it, a small doll, his mouth sewn shut. Emma picked up a book from the floor, her grandmother's final journal. The last entry read, He speaks in whispers now, through the floorboards, through my dreams. I buried the truth beneath the hearth. If they find him, none of us will be safe. Not even Richard. Emma stepped back, heart pounding. Beneath the hearth, she whispered. Hours later, they pried open the base of the fireplace. Ash fell in clouds. Beneath the stones, buried in a wooden box, they found bones. Small, human, wrapped in cloth. Noah backed away. Emma just stared. And then they heard the knock. 3 slow raps. From inside the wall behind them. The next day, Noah disappeared. Emma woke to find his room empty. His car still outside. His phone buzzing on the nightstand. No note. No footprints in the snow. Just gone. She called the police. They filed a missing persons report. She called her father. He answered on the first ring. I told you not to go back, he said. Where is he? Emma demanded. I don't know. You signed Edith out of the hospital. You knew what was happening. His voice dropped. There are things in that house that should have died with her. Emma's voice shook. Then tell me the truth. Silence. Then, Richard said, I wasn't her only child. Part 4. Buried Truth. Snow fell harder the next morning, blanketing the estate in a white silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt final, like the world was holding its breath for what Emma was about to uncover. She sat in the parlor, staring at the bones. The tiny box still lay open near the hearth. She hadn't touched it since last night. Couldn't bring herself to. Not until she knew the full truth. Noah was still missing. The police had no leads. And now her father had dropped a bomb. I wasn't her only child. Emma replayed the words over and over as she lit the fireplace. Needing warmth, needing distraction, needing answers. There was only one place left to look. The shed. The shed had always been off-limits growing up. Her grandmother kept the keys on a chain, which Emma found tucked inside the final journal. The metal was cold, the lock rusted. It took force, but the door groaned open. Darkness, dust, decay. Inside was a cot, chains, a rusted metal pot, old blankets, a lantern, but worst of all, the smell. It wasn't death. Not quite. It was old sweat, urine, mildew. Human, but feral. The room was a prison, and someone had lived here. Emma found another journal hidden beneath the cot. This one wasn't her grandmother's. The handwriting was childish, unsteady, full of spelling mistakes. I do good. I don't scream. I don't talk. She says if I be quiet I get soup. Sometimes I forget my name. She says I don't need it. The woman in black comes at night. She brings bread. I like bread. She says I am not real, that I am just the echo of something bad. Emma's hands shook. The date spanned 15 years. Who was this child? Where was he now? She called her father again. This time she recorded it. Start talking, she said. A long pause. I was adopted, Richard finally admitted. Your grandmother wasn't my real mother. Emma froze. She took me in when I was 9. She said I reminded her of someone. I didn't understand back then. But I think I know now. He sighed, broken. There was another boy before me. She said he was a curse. That he'd been born wrong. No birth certificate.
No baptism.
No name. Emma whispered. What happened to him? She hid him, Richard said. In the shed. For years. Called him a demon. Said he brought voices into her head. Did he die? I don't know, Richard replied. But I heard him. At night. Scratching. Crying. Talking to the walls. Emma's stomach twisted. Why didn't you tell anyone? He sounded hollow. Because sometimes, I still hear him. Emma returned to the library that night. She had to see the hidden room again. The one behind the bookshelf. The one with the drawings on the walls. This time, she brought a flashlight and her recorder. The room was colder than before. The stick figures stared back at her from the wallpaper. Dozens. Some had their mouths sewn shut. Others were headless. One was drawn in red crayon and labeled, Father. On the far wall, a new message had appeared. Scratched deep into the wood. I remember you. Emma backed away. No, she whispered. No, you don't. Her flashlight flickered. A voice whispered. Close. Behind her ear. Emma. She spun around. Nothing. But the door slammed shut. She made it out only after kicking the panel open from inside. Her hands were bleeding. Her heart raced. Back in the parlor, the photo of the unknown child was gone. In its place was a note. Folded. Yellowed. Written in her grandmother's hand. If you are reading this, you stayed too long. There are things in this house that feed on memory. I tried to trap it in the walls. But it found a way out. It always does. His name is Thomas. He was born in silence. He never cried. Not once. He still walks the halls. That night, Emma woke to footsteps in her room. Not creaks. Not floorboards. Footsteps. She stayed still, heart thundering. The air felt heavy, thicker, like something watched. She opened her eyes and saw him, a boy 6, maybe 7, standing at the foot of her bed, face pale, eyes black, mouth stitched shut. He raised his hand and pointed to her chest. Emma screamed. The boy was gone. She packed the next morning. She didn't care about the will, about the house, about what came next. But before she could leave, a knock came at the door. It was the police. They'd found something near the edge of the woods. Noah's coat, torn, bloody, and near it bare footprints, small, barely the size of a child's. Part 5, The Unseen Sun. The snow had stopped, but the cold hadn't. It was the kind of cold that sunk into the bones, into the mind. Emma sat in the back of the sheriff's SUV, Noah's blood-stained coat clutched in her lap. They found it by the woods bordering the estate, but no signs of struggle. No prints, except one. A child's barefoot tracks. Small, clean, leading into the trees, and never out. She tried to call her father again. He didn't answer. The voicemail played again and again. Emma wanted to scream, to cry, but mostly she wanted to know what was real. Who was Thomas? Was he a ghost? A lie? A boy who had lived and maybe still did? She remembered the journal entry. I buried the truth beneath the hearth. She thought it meant bones. But maybe it meant more. The truth wasn't just about what had happened. The truth was about who had let it happen. She returned to the house alone. Even the police didn't want to stay long. The sheriff handed her a flashlight and muttered, "You sure you want to be here?" Like he already knew the answer, and hated it. The house had changed. It breathed now. She could feel it. Every room exhaled cold. Every hallway seemed darker than before. She passed the study and paused. The door was ajar. Inside, the journal she had left closed now lay open. A new entry written in shaky, unfamiliar script. He watches when I sleep. He wears my brother's face. But he is not Noah. Emma began tearing through the house. She flipped through every drawer, every journal, every hidden box. And finally, behind the fireplace panel, she found the second part of the house map, taped to the inside of the brick. The basement was larger than they'd thought. There was a second sublevel, unfinished, unlisted, unspoken. The entrance wasn't easy to find. She pulled back the carpet in the basement and saw faint outlines, old hinges in the concrete. The trapdoor groaned open. Beneath it, a rusted ladder descending into blackness. Emma climbed down. The walls dripped. The air reeked of mildew and metal. The flashlight flickered and then stabilized. There were drawings down here, too. But these were different, darker, more detailed. They showed a family, a man, a woman, a girl, a boy, then the boy alone, behind bars, with stitches on his mouth. Then again, and again, over 50 copies of the same boy. A sound echoed behind her. Footsteps. Emma turned, light trembling in her grip. And there he was, the boy, pale, silent, watching. She didn't scream. She couldn't. "Thomas?" she whispered. He tilted his head. I'm not here to hurt you," she said. He didn't move. "I know what they did to you. I know what they took." His eyes narrowed. Emma stepped forward. "I think Noah came looking for you," she said. Did you see him?" Thomas looked down. On the floor lay Noah's phone. Screen cracked. Bloody. Emma fell to her knees. No. But then she saw it. The last photo on the screen. A blurry shot, taken in haste, of the boy, standing beside someone. Another child. Identical face. Same pale skin. Same dead stare. Twins. There were two. Emma ran from the sublevel, heart hammering. The house groaned around her, walls stretching, moaning. And suddenly he was there. Not Thomas. Not a child. Her father, standing in the parlor. His coat wet with snow. His face hollow. "You were never supposed to know," he said softly. "You lied to me," Emma hissed. "I protected you," he replied. "From what?" Richard stepped forward. His voice cracked. They weren't children. Not really. They were born of silence, of trauma. Edith said they appeared after her miscarriage. She said they were shadows of what could have been. Emma shook her head. You're insane. No, he whispered. They were mine. I saw them too. Heard them. I tried to forget, but they followed me. Followed her. Now they follow you. Emma backed away. Richard stepped closer. I thought locking them away would be enough. But they grew stronger. They became real. Because we remembered them. You knew Noah was in danger, she said. I hoped he wouldn't stay long enough to see them, Richard said. But once they've seen you. Behind him a shadow moved. Then another. 2 small figures stepped from the dark. Thomas. And his twin. Emma turned and ran. She barely made it to the front door before it slammed shut on its own. The lights blew out. The walls began to scream. A chorus of whispers filled the house. You left us. You forgot us. Now we remember you. Emma collapsed to the floor, covering her ears. And then, silence. She woke up hours later. Alone. The house was quiet. Too quiet.
No, Richard.
No boys. No sound. She rose shakily and looked outside. Fresh snow. 2 sets of footprints led away from the house, small, bare. And beside them, Noah's. Still walking. Still following. Final chapter. Part 6. The fire, the footprints vanished at the edge of the woods. Emma stood at the threshold of the estate. Snow swirling around her like ash. 3 sets of tracks, 2 small, 1 Noah's, led into the trees. But none came back. She wanted to follow. She wanted to scream. But the house wanted her to stay. And something deep inside whispered, this isn't over. Back inside, the air had shifted again. The walls no longer creaked. They breathed. And the silence? It wasn't absence. It was waiting. Emma moved slowly through the halls, clutching a crowbar in one hand, her flashlight in the other. Every room seemed darker than it had been hours before. The temperature kept dropping. At the fireplace, the hearth burned, but no wood had been lit. The fire was cold. Blue flames flickered up the walls like fingers. A presence pressed against her chest. Emma dropped to her knees, gripping the crowbar. The journal, the photo, the bones. It all came back in waves. Her grandmother wasn't crazy. Her father wasn't lying. And those boys? They were never meant to exist. The photo album lay open on the coffee table. Emma hadn't left it there. She stared at the picture of Thomas and his twin, smiling with sewn mouths. The edges of the photo were burned, curling as if by unseen heat. Behind her, the radio crackled. Then a voice, Noah's. Please, come back. Emma spun around. Nothing. Just static. She picked up the receiver. He's not me, Noah said again. If he comes to the house, don't let him in. The line went dead. She ran to the front door and locked it, bolted the windows, turned off the lights. But it was too late. A knock echoed through the house. 3 times. Measured. Cold. Emma didn't move. Another knock. Then, Emma. It's me. Open up. Noah's voice. But not his voice. It was just off. Like someone trying to remember how her brother used to sound. She stepped away from the door. The knob began to turn. Slowly. She fled to the attic. The only place with a lock. The door slammed behind her. Inside, the temperature plummeted. She found her grandmother's final journal. Pages she hadn't yet seen. The house wants to remember. The more we speak of him, the more real he becomes. If the memories are burned, so is he. Emma's eyes widened. Memory. That was the key. The drawings. The journals. The photo albums. She had to destroy them. All of them. The house groaned as she ran from the attic, clutching the journals in her arms. The flames in the hearth blazed higher now. Blue. Unnatural. She threw in the first book. The room screamed. The second journal went in. The floor cracked. The photos. The drawings. All fed to the flames. The house began to collapse around her. And then, the final photo. The one of Thomas and the twin. She hesitated. They looked a human. Not monsters. Children. Alone. Forgotten. Emma held the photo as the fire roared higher. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and dropped the picture into the flames. The fire consumed everything. The portrait, the journals, the whispers, the footsteps, and finally the house itself. Emma was found the next morning, standing alone in the snow, barefoot, her hands burned, her eyes blank. The Reed estate was nothing but ash and ice. The firefighters said the blaze was unnatural, no signs of ignition, no source. The snow hadn't stopped it. Nothing had. Weeks later, Emma sat in a hospital bed. Doctors called it trauma-induced psychosis, said she'd imagined it all, that grief had warped her mind. Noah was never found. Neither were the bones, or the journals, or the boys. But Emma knew the truth, because sometimes late at night she'd hear them again, scratching, laughing, calling her name, and sometimes she wanted to answer. The end.